Imagine a world where the sun vanished, replaced by a twilight, and temperatures were.
But 74,000 years ago, on the eve of the greatest cataclysm in human history, our ancestors were not just...
They were a people of profound intellect and skill. Their tools were not just effective, they were works of art. They were masters of their environment, using their knowledge of plants and animal behaviors to hunt with unparalleled efficiency.
With food abundant, they had time. Time for art, for stories, for community. Time to be more than just survivors.
And in their homes, they created a universe of symbols. A rich, spiritual world that gave meaning to their existence.
They lived in a paradise, a world of warmth and abundance, a world they believed would last forever. They were wrong.
The first warning. A deep, guttural whisper from the belly of the earth. A sign that
the animals knew. Their ancient senses felt the change, the rising pressure, the coming doom. They felt the world holding its breath.
She looked at the mountain, the source of their land, the heart of their world, and felt a fear she did not have in them. The tremor did not go unnoticed. The clan's leaders, their senses attuned to the slightest change in the first victims were not of the land, but of the sea. A silent mass death, a clear and... She saw the evidence, but could not comprehend the cause. How could the water, so clear and blue, carry... And then, a more violent warning. The earth itself shuddered. A confirmation that was not... In that moment, they understood. The very ground beneath their feet, the one constant in their lives, could no longer be trusted. But in the face of terror, leadership held them together. Her calm was a shield against their rising panic.
And then, the sun itself began to dim. A strange, sulfurous haze, invisible. The final warning. The animals, their senses screaming of the coming apocalypse, abandoned their territories.
Faced with a power they could not fight, they turned to a power they could only hope to influence. The warnings were over. The Earth's deep, fiery heart would break. There was no name for what was coming. No story, no legend. It was the end of the world. The Toba super-eruption. A force 1,000 times more powerful than any modern volcano.
The sound followed, a physical blow, a wave of pure force that flattened forests and boiled the sea. The sun, the giver of all life, was extinguished. A long, artificial night fell over the earth.
Then came the ash. Not a fine powder, but a suffocating blizzard of rock and glass. A rain.
Trapped in the darkness, they could only listen as their world was buried. Their paradise had become a tomb.
The very air was turning to stone, sealing them in their cave, threatening to suffocate them in their only sanctuary.
She looked out and saw not her home, but the surface of a dead moon. Everything they had ever known.
The roar of the mountain faded, replaced by a new, terrifying silence.
The eruption was over. But the true apocalypse, the long, slow battle for... The roar of the apocalypse faded, replaced by a new, more intimate terror. The fire that gave them warmth was now their enemy, consuming the precious, stale air. Panic was a luxury they could not afford. The leader assessed the barrier, her mind their greatest tool. They could not push their way out. They would have to dig. Their hunting tools became quarry tools, their target not to. And so began their first act of survival in this new world. A desperate, claustrophobic battle. Every inch they gained was paid for in breath and strength. They were digging through their own tomb, a desperate... And then, a pinprick of light. Not the sun, but a ghostly gray glow.
The sight of the gray light, the taste of fresh air, fueled them with a final, desperate surge of strength.
They tore at their prison walls.
She crawled from the darkness of the cave into the grey twilight hell of the New World. This was the dawn of the Volcanic Winter. A world without color, without warmth, without a sun. They emerged not into a world, but into its ghost. Every landmark, every tree, every sound, their first instinct, their first desperate hope was for water. They journeyed to their river, praying it had been spared. But the river was dead. The volcanic ash, rich in sulfur and dissolved minerals, had turned their...
The plants were gone. Smothered by the ash, deprived of sunlight, the forest's great pantry had been...
For the children, the world had lost its color. A profound psychological blow. And the air itself was a poison. Every breath, a mixture of precious oxygen and
And with the plants, the animals had vanished. Those that did not flee were suffocated, buried.
There was nothing to hunt. The game was gone. Their skills as hunters, their sharpest spears. They returned to their cave with nothing. No food, no water, and no hope. Trapped in a dead world, with no food, no water, and a dying fire. How could they possibly survive the first week, let alone a winter that would last for years? In the heart of despair, when all seemed lost, the human mind did not surrender. And then, a spark of an idea, born from the simplest of observations. She saw not just... She remembered the hissing steam vents, the breathing earth they had always avoided, a place of dangerous heat.
They ventured out into the grey hell, a tiny expedition of hope, searching not for a river or a lake, but for a cloud of steam. They had found it, the hot, wet breath of the deep earth, the engine for their desperate new machine. The principle was simple: capture the steam. But the execution was a perilous dance with the scalding heat, and
they needed a cold surface, a large, clean hide, cooled by the frigid air of the The machine was complete. A simple, brilliant assembly of wood, hide, and heat.
They waited, watching, praying their theory was correct, that life could be distilled from the poisonous breath of the earth.
The first drop. Clean, pure, life. In the heart of a dead world, The idea was a miracle. The reality was a torture. A single drop of water was life, but it was... She knew they could not wait for the mountain to give them water. They had to bring the mountain's secret back to their people. They walked back not with the despair of the dying, but with the focused energy of engineers who had just solved an impossible... But time was their enemy. Back in the cave, the clan was fading. Dehydration. They returned to a cave of ghosts, to a clan that had already begun to accept its own death. Words were useless. She needed to show them, not tell them. The first drops of their new world were given not to the strong, but to the weakest.
It was not a cure, but it was a promise.
The proof was undeniable. The plan was audacious. They would recreate her great machine, here, in the cave. They would build...
Fueled by a single sip of hope, they found a new strength. The hunt for water had become a hunt for the very building blocks of their survival.
They stepped out into the dead world, no longer as victims, but as engineers. Their greatest work was about to begin. Their mission was a pilgrimage of ghosts through a dead world. They were not searching for life, but for the... They sought the cold. In a world plunged into winter, coldness itself had become their most precious resource.
Each stone was a piece of their salvation, a heavy, frozen burden that had to be hauled back from the edge of the dead river.
It was a journey of impossible labor, fueled by the last reserves of their strength, and the knowledge that the raw materials had arrived. The stone, the wood, the hide. Now,
the cave became a factory, The central fire, their engine. The wooden frames, the skeleton of their life-saving machines. The cold stones, their artificial sky, were positioned above the fire. The principle was simple, but
With the last of their moisture, they fed the machine, creating a hot, wet...
And then it rained. A clean, pure, life-giving rain, born not from the sky.
They had built a factory of life in the heart of their tomb. The first and greatest challenge had been... They had conquered thirst. With their minds, they had made it rain inside their own cave. The great ash cloud was a blanket, but it was not a warm one. By blocking the sun, their bodies, evolved for a tropical paradise, were completely unprepared for this sudden, artificial... Once again, they turned to their minds. Their battle for survival shifted from creating water to preserve... Their clothing, designed for a world of sun and warmth, was hopelessly inadequate. With painstaking effort, they began. But every new innovation came at a staggering cost. The fire, their only defense against the cold and thirst. The surrounding forest, their traditional source of firewood, was a graveyard. But in the graveyard of their past successes, she saw a new, unconventional source of hope. A desperate experiment. And a brilliant success. The bones, rich in fat and marrow. They had found a new fuel, a new fire, hidden in the skeletons of the dead, with water and now warmth.
they had conquered thirst. They had conquered the cold. But this new fire, this new warmth, was a double...
Their new fuel was the skeletons of their past successes, a finite resource that could not be replenished from a dead forest. The leader understood the brutal equation. To get more fuel, they needed more bones. To get more bones, they needed a carcass. And then she remembered, not the water, but the warmth. In a world of absolute kill... Her theory was a desperate one, a leap of pure logic. If any animals survived the Great Cold, it was a journey into the unknown, a hunt for ghosts based on a fragile theory. But with starvation, the preparation began. This would not be a simple hunt. It was an expedition into a new alien world. They adapted their tools, preparing not just for the potential prey, but for the brutal, unforgiving journey itself. The chosen few prepared to leave, to venture into the heart of the volcanic winter, in search of the impossible. Their mission, to find a flicker of life in a world of ash, to bring it home, or to die The journey began, a desperate pilgrimage through a world that had died, in search of a life that... Every step was a battle. The ash, a thick, heavy blanket, clung to their feet. The world was a museum of the dead. Everywhere they found the ghosts of their former paradise, perfectly... Their own ingenuity was the only thing keeping them alive. The water they carried was a testament to their... And then, a sign. A faint warmth radiating from the deep earth. A wisp. The world was changing again. The gray silence was giving way to a new, hissing landscape. And then, the impossible. A track, a fresh sign, proof. In that single footprint, they saw their salvation. They saw food. They saw fuel. The wariness vanished, replaced by the ancient, electric focus of the hunt. They had found it. The last pocket of life on a frozen planet. A geothermal oasis. They had found life. But in this new world, a rash move meant death. The hunt began not with... This was a landscape of a living, breathing, and violent earth. The ground itself was an unpredictable... And the prey was not foolish. They were survivors, just like the humans. Their senses honed.
And then, the leader saw it. A way to use the valley's greatest danger as his greatest weapon.
The plan was communicated in the silent, precise language of the hunt. A pincer movement, using walls of steam instead of walls of fire.
It was a plan that required perfect timing, perfect stealth, and absolute trust.
The stalk began. A silent, deadly game of chess, with the steam vents as the pawns and the hunters as the kings.
The battlefield was alive, and it fought for neither side. Every step was a risk, every shadow.
The killers took their position. At the end of a corridor of steam, they waited, silent and invisible, for the drive to begin. All the players were in position. The trap was set. The silent signal to begin the drive was about to be given. The signal was given. Not a shout that would reveal their position, but a single, sharp sound to awaken. They revealed themselves as a wall of sound, a terrifying, unnatural rhythm designed to create. The psychological weapon worked to perfection. The herd's instinct to flee was now a tool in the hunter's hands. The steam, once a danger to the hunters, was now their greatest ally. A ghostly, scalding wall.
They kept the pressure on, a relentless wave of sound at the herd's heels, giving them no choice but to run deeper and deeper into the trap.
And at the end of the corridor of steam, the killers waited. Silent, invisible, their hearts pounding. The herd entered the kill zone. The leader, his plan working to perfection, prepared to give the final, deadly signal. They were trapped. A river of panic, with no escape, flowing directly into the waiting spears of the hidden hunters. The signal was given. The killers revealed themselves, not to chase, but to become an unmoving wall of death. The leader of the herd fell, not to a chase, but to a single, perfectly timed and perfectly placed moment.
The plan was not for one kill, but for two. The chaos of the first fall created the opportunity for the second.
The gully, their greatest weapon, now became a cage of their own making. The herd was broken, their escape cut off, their panic absolute.
Their part in the dance was over. They had stood in the path of an avalanche and survived, their courage rewarded.
And from the high rock, the leader's cry echoed, a declaration of victory. The impossible gamble had paid off.
The great drive was over. The survivors fled, carrying a new, terrifying memory of the small. And then, silence. A profound quiet descended upon the valley floor.
The hunters emerged, not with the arrogance of conquerors, but with the humbling awe of those who had gambled everything and won. They had done it. They had found life in a dead world. They had brought home a future, written in courage and steam.
And then, silence. A profound quiet as the hunters looked.
The weight of their clan's survival had rested on his shoulders. In that moment, he felt not the joy of victory.
And then, the joy, the raw, unrestrained triumph of having achieved the impossible, of having stared.
But even in their triumph, there was respect. A silent acknowledgement of the great spirit they had outwitted. The hunt was won, but the prize was too great for four to carry. The news of their success and the call for aid had to be sent. He ran, carrying not just a message, but a symbol of their victory. A promise of life for his starving taste.
But back in the cave, the battle against time was being lost. Hope had faded. And then, a sound. Faint at first. A rhythm that did not belong in the dead.
He brought no words, only proof.
A single tuft. The news shattered their despair. The fire in their hearts
so close to being... The news brought not rest, but furious energy. The race was now on to reach the prize before the dead world claimed.
Before they stepped into the unknown, they sought strength in ritual, a shared blessing, binding them together.
The entire clan moved as one, a fragile river of hope flowing across a dead land. Every step was a struggle. The air itself was a weapon, and the ground a constant drain on their... The world they knew was gone. Every tree, every plant, a memory, a stark reminder of the... They entered a landscape from another world. The hot, breathing earth, a place of power and danger.
And then, they saw them. A fragile line of humanity, coming to claim the bounty.
The first touch was a prayer. A deep, heartfelt thanks for the great spirit that had offered itself.
For the starving, it was more than meat. It was a promise. A tangible, undeniable sign that life... The celebration was over. The hard, vital work of survival had truly begun. They would harvest... The work began immediately. A monumental task of engineering in reverse. The first challenge was to breach a division of labor, a specialization of skill. The heavy axes for the brute force, the fine flakes for...
Hour after hour they toiled, a perfectly coordinated ballet of butchery. Each member knew their task.
But such a colossal success was a beacon in the dead world. The scent of blood and meat traveled for miles. But their plan had accounted for this inevitability. They knew a prize this great would have to be defended. They formed a ring of fire and sharpened stone, a defiant guard against the encroaching shadows. Their coordinated defense, born of a new confidence, held firm. Behind the wall of warriors, the vital work of processing the meat continued through the night, a testament to their incredible focus. This was the true power of their resilience. Not just the hunt, but the unbreakable, coordinated effort. The dawn brought no rest, only a new and monumental challenge. Butchering the giants was one victory. But in the face of impossible labor, ingenuity sparked. The skeletons of their prey became the tools of their tool. The innovation spread like fire. They fashioned sledges from the ribs and shoulder blades of their prey, a testament. A grueling journey began. A train of human muscle, hauling their future, foot by painful...
First of the bounty arrived home, not to rest, but to begin the final, crucial race against decay and the long, cold winter. Preservation was the key to long-term survival, a skill as vital as the hunt itself, passed down through generations.
The cave became a larder, its smoky air a shield against rot, preserving their future
They understood their new environment intimately. They knew that the Great Cold, their constant enemy, could also be their greatest ally in the fight against decay.
And how do we know this? The bones themselves tell a story. Archaeologists have discovered these ancient ice cellars and large...
The hunt had given them everything. Food, fuel, warmth, tools, and a secure future, bought with their courage.
The great hunt had fed them through the brutal winter. Starvation was a forgotten ghost, and with security came the luxury of time. With time and new materials, they began to build. From the bones of the fallen giants, they built new homes.
With time and a full belly, their minds, once consumed with survival, turned to art, to beauty, to legacy.
The story of the Great Hunt became a lesson in strategy, and art became their textbook. The knowledge of how to think.
They no longer needed to gamble their lives on giants. Their new technology, born of their great trial, made
survival gave way to culture. With security came the luxury of beauty, art, adornment, and fingering.
And these stories, once thought lost to the mists of time, are being rediscovered. Burials. This explosion of art and symbolism across the globe was not a coincidence. It was the product of a mind. The volcanic winter was an evolutionary bottleneck, a fiery crucible that tested all of humanity.
The challenges they faced, the ingenuity they fostered, did not just allow them to survive the Ice Age.